The machines beeped steadily in the Grandmaster bedroom as Rebecca Johnson clutched her cleaning supplies, her dark hands trembling as she stared at the pale, frail man who had summoned her. Harrison Blake, the billionaire who owned half the city, lay dying in his massive four-poster bed, his breathing shallow and labored. His family surrounded him like vultures, their expensive suits and designer dresses a stark contrast to Rebecca's simple blue uniform. "Rebecca," Harrison whispered, his voice barely audible above the medical equipment. "Come closer." Patricia Blake Winters, Harrison's sister, stepped forward with a sharp intake of breath. "Harrison, you need rest. The maid can clean later." "No." Harrison's voice gained strength as his gray eyes focused on Rebecca. "I need to speak with her. Alone." Trevor Blake, Harrison's nephew and heir apparent, crossed his arms. "Uncle Harrison, you're not thinking clearly. The medication has you confused. Rebecca is just the help." But Harrison's gaze never left Rebecca's face. She had worked in this mansion for 12 years, cleaning every room, preparing every meal, caring for this house like it was her own. She knew every corner, every secret, every moment of joy and sorrow these walls had witnessed. "Everyone out," Harrison commanded with surprising authority. "Now." The family exchanged worried glances. Dr. Martinez, the family physician, checked his watch nervously. "Mr. Blake, your vitals are concerning. Perhaps we should." "Out," Harrison repeated, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Reluctantly, the group filed out, Patricia shooting Rebecca a venomous look as she passed. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving Rebecca alone with the dying man who had changed her life simply by treating her with basic human dignity. Are you wondering what Harrison Blake could possibly want to tell his maid that was so secret his own family couldn't hear it? Drop a comment below and let me know what you think his dying wish might be. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one. Harrison struggled to sit up, and Rebecca immediately rushed to help him, adjusting his pillows with gentle hands. "Mr. Blake, you should rest." "Rebecca," he said, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "I'm dying. We both know it. But before I go, I need to tell you something that will change everything." Rebecca's heart pounded. In all her years working for him, Harrison had always been kind, always fair, but this intensity was new. "Sir, maybe you should call your family back in." "My family," Harrison laughed bitterly, the sound turning into a cough. "That's exactly what I need to talk to you about. You see, Rebecca, I've been watching. I've been listening. And I know things about them that would horrify you." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. She had indeed seen things over the years, hushed arguments about money, Patricia's gambling debts, Trevor's failed business ventures that Harrison always quietly covered. But she had never said a word. It wasn't her place. "Sir, I don't understand." Harrison's eyes grew distant. 12 years ago, when you started working here, do you remember what you told me during your interview?" Rebecca nodded slowly. "I said I would take care of your home like it was my own family's home." "And you have?" Harrison's voice softened. "When I had pneumonia 2 winters ago, who stayed by my bedside for 3 days straight? It was just my job, sir. When my prize roses were dying because the gardener quit without notice, who researched plant care and nursed them back to health?" Rebecca felt tears welling up. "Mr. Blake, why are you saying all this?" Harrison reached for the bedside drawer with shaking hands. Rebecca helped him open it, revealing a thick manila envelope sealed with red wax. "Because, my dear Rebecca, you are the only person in this house who has ever cared about me, not my money. You are the only one who sees value in preserving beautiful things, not destroying them for profit. You are the only one who understands what it means to work hard and be grateful for what you have." Rebecca stared at the envelope, confusion and fear mixing in her chest. "Sir, I think the medication is making you say things you don't mean." "I have never been more clear about anything in my entire life," Harrison said firmly. "Rebecca, I need you to promise me something." "What, sir?" "Promise me you will not let them destroy what I've built. Promise me you will use everything I'm giving you to help people, to make the world a little bit better, the way you've made my life better just by being in it." Rebecca felt the room spinning. "Sir, what are you talking about?" Harrison pressed the envelope into her hands. "This contains a copy of my will, Rebecca. As of tomorrow, when Mr. Thompson reads the official document, you will own everything. The house, the businesses, the investments, the foundation, all of it." Rebecca dropped the envelope like it was on fire. "No, sir, you can't mean that. Your family. My family has shown me their true nature over the years. Patricia owes $300,000 to various casinos and has been stealing from my accounts to cover her debts. Trevor has been embezzling from the company thinking I wouldn't notice. They see me as a bank account, not a person. The revelation hit Rebecca like a physical blow. She had suspected Patricia's gambling problem, but embezzlement? She thought of Trevor's expensive cars, his lavish vacations, his constant talk about the family business. But sir, I can't accept this. I'm just a maid. I don't know how to run businesses or manage money. Harrison smiled sadly. You know how to care for things that matter. You know the difference between right and wrong. You understand the value of hard work and gratitude. That's more than any MBA can teach. Outside the door, Rebecca could hear the family's voices growing louder, more impatient. Patricia was arguing with someone, probably Dr. Martinez, about how long this conversation was taking. Rebecca, listen to me carefully. Harrison's voice grew urgent. They will try to contest the will. They will try to convince you that you don't deserve this. They will offer you money to walk away. But you cannot let them win. Not because of the money, but because of what that money can do in the right hands versus the wrong ones. Rebecca picked up the envelope with trembling hands. Mr. Blake, I don't know if I can do this. You can and you will. But more importantly, you will find love and happiness in ways you never imagined. This inheritance isn't just about money, Rebecca. It's about giving you the freedom to live the life you deserve, to find someone who loves you for your beautiful heart, not what you can provide. Tears streamed down Rebecca's face as she looked at this man who had seen her worth when no one else did. Why me, sir? Really, why me? Harrison's eyes grew heavy, but his voice remained clear. Because in 12 years you never once asked me for anything extra. You never hinted that you needed money or wanted special treatment. You simply showed up every day and made my life better by caring about the details that mattered. You watered my plants when I forgot. You remembered my late wife's birthday every year and put fresh flowers on her portrait. You noticed when I was sad and made my favorite soup without being asked. The machines began beeping more rapidly. Harrison's breathing grew shallower. Promise me, Rebecca. Promise me you'll accept this gift and use it well. Rebecca squeezed his hand gently. I promise, Mr. Blake. I promise I'll try to honor your wishes. Harrison smiled peacefully. Thank you. Now call them back in. It's time. As Rebecca opened the door to let the family return, she clutched the envelope to her chest, knowing that everything in her life was about to change forever. She had no idea just how dramatic that change would be. The next morning, Rebecca sat in the back of the elegant conference room at Thompson & Associates law firm, still wearing her simple blue dress and clutch purse. She felt completely out of place among the Blake family members who filled the leather chairs around the polished mahogany table. Patricia Blake Winters sat rigidly in her black Chanel suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight chignon. Trevor Blake lounged in his chair wearing an expensive gray suit, checking his gold watch repeatedly. Dr. Martinez sat quietly in the corner, along with Harrison's business partner Carlos Martinez, no relation to the doctor who had flown in from Chicago. Mr. Thompson, a distinguished elderly man with kind eyes, cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're here for the reading of Harrison Blake's last will and testament. Rebecca felt sick to her stomach. She had barely slept, clutching the envelope Harrison had given her, reading and rereading the impossible words inside. Part of her hoped it was all a mistake, that the medication had confused him. Before I begin, Mr. Thompson continued, I want to state that this will was drafted 6 months ago, reviewed multiple times, and Mr. Blake was of completely sound mind when he signed it. I have medical documentation to support this if needed. Patricia leaned forward. Of course he was of sound mind. Harrison was sharp as a tack right until the end. Though I do wonder why Rebecca is here. She glanced dismissively at Rebecca. Ms. Johnson is here because she is mentioned in the will, Mr. Thompson replied calmly. Trevor snorted. Let me guess, he left her a few $1,000s as a thank you for her service. Very generous of Uncle Harrison. Mr. Thompson opened the official document. I shall read the relevant portions. I, Harrison Blake, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath the following. To my sister Patricia Blake Winters, I leave the sum of $50,000, with the stipulation that she seek professional help for her gambling addiction. Patricia's face turned white. What gambling addiction? That's ridiculous. To my nephew Trevor Blake, Mr. Thompson continued, I leave the sum of $75,000, with the recommendation that he find honest employment and discontinue his embezzlement activities. Trevor shot to his feet. Embezzlement? Uncle Harrison was clearly losing his mind. This is slander. Please sit down, Mr. Blake, Mr. Thompson said firmly. I'm not finished. Rebecca's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold them still. This was really happening. To Dr. Martinez, who cared for me with genuine concern, I leave $100,000 in my gratitude. Dr. Martinez nodded respectfully. Thank you, Harrison. It was my honor. To Carlos Martinez, my business partner and friend, I leave $2 million in the Chicago office building, knowing he will continue to run the business with integrity. Carlos, a handsome man in his 40s with kind brown eyes, looked genuinely shocked. I don't know what to say. Harrison was a good man. Patricia was growing more agitated. Get to the point, Thompson. Who inherits the estate? Mr. Thompson looked directly at Rebecca. The remainder of Harrison Blake's estate, including all properties, businesses, investments, and assets valued at approximately $420 million, I leave to Rebecca Johnson, who has shown me what it means to care for something with your whole heart. The room exploded. Patricia screamed, "That's impossible. She's the maid. She's nobody." Trevor slammed his hand on the table. "I'll contest this immediately. No court will uphold this farce." But Rebecca just sat there, frozen, as the reality crashed over her like a tidal wave. $420 million. She made $30,000 a year cleaning Harrison's house. The numbers didn't compute in her brain. Carlos Martinez stood up and walked over to her. "Rebecca, right? Congratulations. Harrison spoke of you often. He said you were the daughter he never had." Rebecca looked up at him through her tears. "I can't do this. This is too much. I don't know anything about business or money or—" She gestured helplessly around the room. "You'll learn," Carlos said gently. "And you'll have help." Patricia marched over to Rebecca, her face twisted with rage. "You manipulated him, didn't you? You saw a lonely old man and you worked your way into his confidence. You probably poisoned his mind against his own family." Rebecca stood up slowly, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. "Mrs. Blake Winters, I never asked your brother for anything except my paycheck. I cared for him because he was a good man who treated me with respect." "Respect?" Trevor laughed harshly. "You were the help. He paid you to clean toilets and make beds. Don't confuse basic employment with respect." Mr. Thompson interrupted. "There's more to the will. Mr. Blake also included a letter to be read aloud. Would you like me to continue?" Rebecca nodded, unable to speak. Mr. Thompson unfolded a handwritten letter. "My dear family, if you are hearing this, it means I am gone and you are probably very angry. You may be wondering why I chose Rebecca over my own blood relatives. The answer is simple: she loved me when I was alive, not just when I died." Patricia started crying, but Rebecca couldn't tell if the tears were from grief or fury. "Rebecca, you once told me that kindness costs nothing but means everything. You have shown me kindness every day for 12 years. You remembered my birthday when my own family forgot. You stayed with me through every illness, every bad day, every moment when I felt alone in this big house." Rebecca was sobbing openly now. "I am giving you this inheritance not as a burden, but as a gift of freedom. Freedom to live without worry, to help others the way you helped me, and to find the love and happiness you deserve. Use this money to make the world better, one act of kindness at a time." The room was silent except for Rebecca's quiet tears. "To my family, I hope you will use your inheritance to better yourselves and find genuine happiness, not just financial gain. And I hope someday you will understand that Rebecca earned this through years of selfless service and genuine care." Mr. Thompson folded the letter. The will is legally binding and was witnessed by 3 independent parties. "Ms. Johnson, you are now one of the wealthiest women in the state." Rebecca looked around the room at the faces staring at her, some with anger, some with shock, one with genuine kindness. Carlos Martinez smiled encouragingly at her. "I need some air," Rebecca whispered and fled from the room. Outside the law office, she sat on a bench in the autumn sunshine, trying to process what had just happened. $420 million. A mansion. Businesses she didn't understand. And a family that now hated her with every fiber of their being. Carlos Martinez came out and sat beside her. "How are you holding up?" "I feel like I'm dreaming," Rebecca admitted. "Or having a nightmare. I don't know which." "Harrison was my business partner for 15 years, Carlos said. "He never made decisions lightly. If he chose you, he had very good reasons." Rebecca looked at this kind man who seemed to be the only person not angry with her. "You don't think I manipulated him?" Carlos laughed softly. "Rebecca, Harrison Blake was one of the shrewdest businessmen I ever knew. No one could manipulate him into anything. He saw something in you that his family couldn't see: genuine goodness." "But I don't know how to be rich," Rebecca said helplessly. "I don't know how to run companies or make investment decisions or any of this." That's what advisors are for, Carlos replied. Harrison trusted Mr. Thompson implicitly. He's handled the estate planning for years. And he paused, looking slightly embarrassed. Harrison asked me to help guide you through the business side if you'd accept my assistance. Rebecca felt a spark of hope. You would do that? It would be my honor, Carlos said sincerely. Harrison was like a brother to me. Helping you honor his wishes is the least I can do. Behind them, the law office doors burst open as Patricia and Trevor stormed out, deep in heated conversation about lawyers and contests and unfair advantages. They're going to fight this, aren't they? Rebecca asked quietly. Probably, Carlos admitted. But Harrison prepared for that. The will is ironclad and he documented everything. They can try but they won't succeed. Rebecca took a deep breath. So what happens now? Carlos stood and offered her his hand. Now you go home to your mansion and start figuring out how to change the world. As Rebecca took his hand and stood up, she felt the first tiny flutter of excitement beneath her overwhelming fear. Maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Rebecca stood in the grand foyer of what was now her mansion, still unable to believe the ornate chandelier and marble floors belonged to her. It had been 3 days since the will reading and she had barely slept. Every morning she woke up expecting to find herself back in her small apartment, getting ready to clean someone else's house. The doorbell rang and Rebecca hesitated. Since inheriting the estate, she'd received dozens of calls from reporters, distant relatives she'd never heard of, and financial advisors wanting to help her manage her newfound wealth. Mr. Thompson had advised her not to speak to anyone without him present. Through the ornate glass panels beside the front door, she could see Patricia Blake Winters and Trevor Blake standing on the steps, along with 2 men in expensive suits carrying briefcases. Rebecca opened the door slowly. Mrs. Blake Winters. Trevor. Patricia pushed past her into the foyer without waiting for an invitation. We need to talk. The 2 men in suits followed her in and Trevor came last, his face set in grim determination. Rebecca noticed he was wearing an even more expensive watch than usual, probably purchased on credit assuming he'd inherit millions. Who are these gentlemen? Rebecca asked, trying to keep her voice steady. My lawyers, Patricia announced. This is Mr. Harrison Fletcher from Fletcher, Webb & Associates, and this is Mr. Richard Stone from Stone Legal Group. They're here to discuss a very generous offer we're prepared to make. Rebecca's heart began racing. An offer. Mr. Fletcher, a thin man with cold gray eyes, stepped forward. Ms. Johnson, let's be honest about the situation here. You're in over your head. You have no experience managing wealth of this magnitude, no understanding of complex business operations, and no legal protection against the numerous challenges that will arise. Mr. Stone nodded. What my colleague is saying is that this inheritance, while legally yours, is essentially a burden you're not equipped to handle. Trevor crossed his arms smugly. Which is why we're here to help you. Rebecca gestured toward the sitting room. Please, let's sit down and discuss this properly. They arranged themselves around the elegant coffee table, Patricia and her lawyers on one side, Rebecca alone on the other. She wished Carlos was here, but he had flown back to Chicago to handle business matters and wouldn't return until tomorrow. Mr. Fletcher opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick document. We're prepared to offer you $20 million in exchange for renouncing your claim to the estate. Rebecca's eyes widened. $20 million was more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. It was generous, incredibly generous. That's nearly double what Uncle Harrison left the rest of us combined, Trevor added. You'd be set for life. Patricia leaned forward, her voice taking on a syrupy tone. Rebecca, dear, think about this logically. You're a simple woman with simple needs. What would you do with $400 million? It would just complicate your life unnecessarily. Mr. Stone pulled out another document. We've also prepared a standard non-disclosure agreement. You would agree not to discuss the family's private affairs or the circumstances of the inheritance with the media. Rebecca stared at the papers, her mind spinning. $20 million. She could buy a nice house, help her sister pay for her children's college, donate to charity. She could live comfortably forever without the stress and responsibility of managing an enormous estate. I need time to think about this, Rebecca said finally. Patricia's mask of sweetness slipped slightly. What is there to think about? This is an incredibly generous offer. It's also final, Mr. Fletcher added coldly. We won't make this offer again. Trevor stood up and began pacing around the room. Look, Rebecca, let's cut through the pretense here. You know you don't belong in this world. You know you're not equipped for this. Take the money and go back to your normal life. Something in his tone triggered a spark of anger in Rebecca's chest. My normal life? You know what I mean, Trevor said dismissively. Your simple life. Your appropriate life. Rebecca stood up slowly, and for the first time since this all began, she felt a surge of strength. Mr. Blake, your uncle specifically chose me over you. He had his reasons. His reasons were clouded by senility and manipulation, Patricia snapped, dropping her fake kindness entirely. Harrison was a sick old man who was manipulated by someone who saw an opportunity. That's not true, Rebecca said firmly. Mr. Stone leaned forward. Ms. Johnson, let me be very clear about what you're facing if you refuse this offer. We will contest this will aggressively. We will examine every interaction you had with Mr. Blake for the past year. We will interview every person who worked in this house. We will question your motives, your methods, and your character. Mr. Fletcher nodded. The legal fees alone will cost you millions. The stress will consume your life. And even if you ultimately prevail, which is far from certain, you'll spend years in courtrooms instead of enjoying your life. Rebecca felt her resolve wavering. She thought of the kind, frail man who had trusted her with everything he'd built. What would happen to Harrison's charitable foundation? Patricia waved dismissively. We'd continue supporting the charities, of course. We're not heartless. But Rebecca had managed Harrison's household accounts for years. She knew Patricia hadn't made a charitable donation in the past 5 years, and Trevor's idea of charity was tipping the valet at his country club. I need to discuss this with Mr. Thompson, Rebecca said. Thompson is Harrison's lawyer, not yours, Mr. Fletcher pointed out. His loyalty was to the deceased, not to you. You need your own legal representation. Which we can help you find, Mr. Stone added. We know several excellent attorneys who specialize in estate planning. Trevor stopped pacing and sat back down. Rebecca, be smart about this. You're a good person, but you're not prepared for the kind of attacks that are coming. The media attention alone will destroy your privacy forever. Patricia nodded vigorously. Once word gets out about your inheritance, you'll be hounded by reporters, fortune hunters, and people claiming to be long-lost relatives. Is that really how you want to live? Rebecca thought about the past few days, the constant phone calls, the photographers who had already started gathering outside the mansion gates. They weren't wrong about the media attention. And then there are the business decisions, Mr. Fletcher continued. You'll be responsible for thousands of employees across multiple companies. One wrong decision could cost people their jobs. The weight of responsibility settled on Rebecca's shoulders like a lead blanket. She hadn't thought about the employees, the people whose livelihoods depended on the businesses Harrison had built. Take the $20 million, Patricia urged. It's more than enough for a wonderful life without all the stress and responsibility. Rebecca looked around the beautiful room where she dusted and cleaned for 12 years. She thought about Harrison's last words, his request that she not let them destroy what he'd built. But she also thought about the employees who might suffer if she made poor decisions, the legal battles that could drag on for years, the privacy and peace she'd lose forever. Rebecca began, then stopped. I need 24 hours to decide. Mr. Fletcher snapped his briefcase shut. I told you this offer expires today. Then I guess you'll have to extend it, Rebecca said quietly, surprising herself with her firmness. Because I won't be pressured into making this decision right now. Patricia's face flushed red. You're making a huge mistake, Rebecca. We're trying to be generous, but our patience has limits. Is that a threat, Mrs. Blake Winters? It's a reality check, Trevor said coldly. With or without your cooperation, we're going to get what's rightfully ours. After they left, Rebecca sat alone in the grand sitting room, staring at the papers they'd left behind. $20 million. A simple life. No stress, no responsibility, no people depending on her decisions. But also no chance to honor Harrison's wishes. No opportunity to use his wealth to help others the way he'd wanted. No possibility of becoming the person he'd believed she could be. Rebecca picked up her phone and dialed Carlos Martinez's number in Chicago. Carlos? It's Rebecca. I think I need that help you offered. Carlos Martinez arrived at the mansion the next morning carrying 2 large coffees and a box of pastries from Rebecca's favorite bakery downtown. She met him at the front door, surprised by his thoughtfulness. How did you know about Murphy's Bakery? She asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. Harrison mentioned that you always brought him their blueberry scones when he was feeling down, Carlos replied with a warm smile. I figured we both might need some comfort food today. They settled in Harrison's old study, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and the heavy mahogany desk where he'd conducted business for decades. Rebecca felt his presence strongly in this room, and it gave her courage. So Patricia and Trevor made their move, Carlos said after Rebecca explained yesterday's visit. $20 million, Carlos. That's more money than I ever dreamed of having. Carlos sipped his coffee thoughtfully. It's also less than 5% of what Harrison left you. Tell me, what do you think he'd say about their offer? Rebecca smiled sadly. He'd probably say that if they were offering $20 million to go away, the estate must be worth much more than that to them. Smart woman, Carlos grinned. Harrison always said you understood people's motives better than anyone he knew. Rebecca pulled out the legal documents Patricia's lawyers had left behind. But they're not wrong about the challenges I'm facing. Look at all this business stuff I don't understand. Carlos examined the papers. Blake Enterprises, Blake Foundation, Blake Properties, Blake Investments. 4 main divisions, each with their own management teams. See? I don't even know what half these companies do. Carlos set the papers aside and looked at her seriously. Rebecca, do you know what Harrison's greatest talent was as a businessman? Making money? Choosing good people and trusting them to do their jobs, Carlos replied. Harrison wasn't an expert in construction or real estate development or charitable work. But he was an expert at finding people who were experts in those things. Rebecca felt a spark of understanding. You mean I don't have to know how to do everything myself? Exactly. You need to know how to ask the right questions and make good decisions based on the answers you get. That's what leadership really is. Carlos pulled out his tablet and showed Rebecca an organizational chart. Let's start with the people Harrison trusted most. Margaret Chin runs Blake Properties, our real estate division. She's been with the company for 8 years and increased property values by 30%. I remember her, Rebecca said. She came to the Christmas parties. Always very polite, asked about my family. Good sign, Carlos nodded. Robert Kim handles Blake Investments, our financial portfolio. Harrison trusted him completely with investment decisions. Rebecca studied the names and faces on the screen. What about the foundation? That's run by Dr. Lisa Washington. She's a former nonprofit director who Harrison recruited 5 years ago. The foundation gives away about $10 million a year to various causes. $10 million a year? Rebecca's eyes widened. That seems like so much. Carlos pulled up another screen. It's actually conservative. Many wealthy foundations give away 5 to 10% of their assets annually. With Harrison's wealth, you could easily double or triple the charitable giving if you wanted to. For the first time since inheriting, Rebecca felt excited rather than terrified. You mean I could help even more people? Much more. But first, let's make sure you understand what you're inheriting. Carlos showed her financial reports, property listings, and business summaries. Blake Properties owns commercial buildings in 12 cities. Blake Investments has a diversified portfolio of stocks, bonds, and other assets. Blake Enterprises handles Harrison's original manufacturing businesses. Rebecca listened carefully, asking questions when she didn't understand something. Carlos was patient, explaining complex financial concepts in simple terms. The good news, Carlos said, is that all these businesses are profitable and well managed. You're not inheriting problems, you're inheriting success. What about the legal challenges? Patricia's lawyers seemed very confident they could contest the will. Carlos's expression grew serious. Let me show you something Harrison prepared for exactly this situation. He pulled out a thick folder from his briefcase. Harrison documented everything over the past 2 years. Patricia's gambling debts, Trevor's embezzlement, their attempts to pressure him into giving them money. He has bank records, emails, witness statements. Rebecca flipped through the documents, shocked by the evidence of Patricia's casino visits and Trevor's unauthorized withdrawals from company accounts. He knew they'd contest the will? He was certain of it. That's why he was so thorough in documenting his reasons for disinheriting them. No court will overturn a will this well documented, especially when the beneficiary clearly deserves the inheritance. The phone in the study rang and Rebecca answered hesitantly. Blake Residence. Ms. Johnson? This is Margaret Chen from Blake Properties. I wondered if you might have time to meet today. I'd like to discuss some upcoming projects and get your thoughts on our direction. Rebecca looked at Carlos, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, Miss Chen. I'd like that very much. Wonderful. Would 2 o'clock work for you? After hanging up, Rebecca felt nervous again. What if I say something stupid? What if I make bad decisions? Rebecca, what did you do when Harrison was sick with pneumonia 2 years ago? I researched his symptoms, talked to Dr. Martinez about the best care, made sure he took his medications, monitored his temperature. Rebecca paused. I asked questions and made decisions based on good information. Exactly. Business decisions work the same way. You gather information, ask questions, consider the options, and make the best choice you can with what you know. Margaret Chin arrived precisely at 2 o'clock, a efficient-looking woman in her 40s carrying a briefcase and wearing a professional navy suit. Rebecca received her in the formal dining room, feeling more confident with Carlos there for support. Ms. Johnson, first let me say how sorry I am for your loss, Margaret began. Harrison was a wonderful man to work for. Thank you. He spoke very highly of you. Margaret opened her briefcase and pulled out several folders. I brought information about our current projects so you can understand the scope of our operations. For the next hour, Margaret explained Blake Properties Holdings. Office buildings, retail centers, apartment complexes, and several major development projects in progress. What I'd like your input on, Margaret said, is our expansion into affordable housing. Harrison was very interested in this before he passed away. Rebecca leaned forward. Affordable housing? Yes. We've identified several opportunities to develop housing for working families, teachers, firefighters, people like that who serve the community but can't afford luxury apartments. Rebecca felt her heart racing with excitement. This was exactly the kind of project Harrison would have loved. How would that work? Margaret explained the financial structure, the community partnerships, and the potential impact. We could house about 300 families in the first phase, with rents significantly below market rate. That sounds wonderful, Rebecca said. What do you need from me? Approval to move forward with the initial investment. About $5 million for the first project. Rebecca looked at Carlos, who smiled and nodded. Miss Chin, I approve the project. When can we start? Margaret's face lit up. Really? That's wonderful. We can break ground within 6 months. After Margaret left, Rebecca felt exhilarated. Carlos, did I just make my first business decision? You did, and it was a good one. Harrison would be proud. The phone rang again, and this time it was Dr. Washington from the foundation, wanting to discuss expanding their scholarship program. Then Robert Kim called about a potential investment in renewable energy companies. By evening, Rebecca had approved 3 new charitable initiatives, authorized 2 business investments, and scheduled meetings with all the division heads. I think I'm starting to understand, Rebecca told Carlos as they reviewed the day's decisions. It's not about knowing everything. It's about caring about the right things and trusting good people to help. That's exactly right. And Rebecca? Carlos paused, looking at her with genuine admiration. You're going to be amazing at this. As Rebecca went to bed that night in the master bedroom that still felt too grand for her, she realized she hadn't thought about Patricia's $20 million offer once all day. For the first time since Harrison's death, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could actually do this. Rebecca woke up to the sound of her phone ringing at 6 in the morning. Groggily, she answered without checking the caller ID. Ms. Johnson? This is Janet Parks from Channel 7 News. We're running a story about your inheritance and we'd like your comment on allegations that you manipulated an elderly man into changing his will. Rebecca sat up straight, suddenly wide awake. What allegations? Patricia Blake Winters has provided us with several interviews suggesting that you took advantage of Harrison Blake's deteriorating mental state. She claims to have evidence that you isolated him from his family and influenced his financial decisions. Rebecca hung up the phone, her hands shaking. Within minutes it rang again. And again. By 7 o'clock, she had received calls from 5 different news outlets, all asking about the same story. She called Carlos, who arrived within an hour carrying newspapers and looking grim. It started, he said, spreading the papers across the kitchen table. The headlines made Rebecca's stomach drop. Maid inherits fortune. Family cries foul. From rags to riches. The inheritance that shocked everyone. Billionaire's dying wish or dying mistake? The articles painted Rebecca as an opportunistic manipulator who had taken advantage of a lonely old man. Patricia was quoted extensively, describing how Rebecca had systematically isolated Harrison from his family and poisoned his mind against his relatives. They're making me sound like a criminal, Rebecca said, tears starting to flow. Carlos put a comforting hand on her shoulder. This is exactly what Harrison expected them to do. It's why he documented everything so thoroughly. The doorbell rang, and through the window they could see news vans lined up outside the mansion gates. Reporters with cameras were trying to get shots of the house. I can't leave, Rebecca realized. They'll follow me everywhere. You don't have to leave, Carlos said firmly. We handle this from here. Mr. Thompson is already preparing a response. The house phone rang. Rebecca answered cautiously. Rebecca dear, it's Patricia. I think we need to talk. Rebecca put the call on speaker so Carlos could hear. Mrs. Blake Winters, I saw the news stories. Patricia's voice was smooth as silk. I'm so sorry about that, darling. The reporters just won't leave us alone. They keep asking questions about Harrison's final months, and I have to tell them the truth about what I observed. Which is what, exactly? Well, how you gradually took over more and more of his personal affairs. How you were always there when family visited, listening to private conversations. How you seemed to have such influence over his daily decisions. Rebecca felt her anger rising. I was doing my job, Mrs. Blake Winters. I was taking care of him. Of course you were, dear. But you can see how it might look to outsiders. A young woman, alone with an elderly man, gradually gaining more and more control. I never controlled anything. I cleaned his house and made his meals. Patricia's voice sharpened slightly. Did you or did you not handle his personal correspondence in the final months? Rebecca hesitated. Harrison had asked her to help him write letters when his arthritis made it difficult to hold a pen. I helped him with letters when his hands were bothering him. So you did handle his correspondence. Did you or did not manage his household expenses? Yes, but only because he asked me to. His eyesight was getting worse and the bills were confusing him. So you managed his money. And did you or did not have private conversations with him about his family? Rebecca realized she was being trapped. Every innocent act of caregiving was being twisted into something sinister. Mrs. Blake Winters, if you have something to say, please just say it. I'm saying that my offer of $20 million is still on the table, but it won't be for much longer. Once this media attention really gets going, once the legal challenges begin in earnest, that generous settlement will no longer be possible. Carlos gestured for Rebecca to end the call. I have to go, Mrs. Blake Winters. Think carefully, Rebecca. Is this really how you want to spend the rest of your life? Fighting legal battles and defending yourself in the media? After hanging up, Rebecca slumped in her chair. Carlos, what if she's right? What if I can't handle this kind of pressure? Before Carlos could answer, the phone rang again. This time it was Mr. Thompson. Rebecca, I've been contacted by several news outlets. Don't speak to any reporters without me present. Patricia and Trevor are conducting a coordinated media campaign, but we have our own evidence to present. What kind of evidence? Harrison made video recordings, Rebecca. Over the past year, whenever he made important decisions about his estate, he recorded himself explaining his reasoning. He was very concerned about protecting you from exactly these kinds of allegations. Rebecca felt a surge of gratitude for Harrison's foresight. What do the recordings say? They show a man of completely sound mind, making rational decisions based on years of observation. He specifically addresses his family's behavior and explains why he chose you. We'll release selected portions to the media if necessary. The afternoon brought more challenges. Rebecca's phone rang with calls from Blake Enterprises employees, confused and worried about the news reports. Margaret Chin called to ask if the affordable housing project was still moving forward. Dr. Washington from the foundation wanted to know if the scholarship expansion was in jeopardy. They're all depending on me, Rebecca told Carlos. If I give up and take Patricia's money, what happens to all these projects? What happens to the people Harrison wanted to help? Carlos showed her emails from employees expressing support. Look at these messages, Rebecca. The people who actually worked with Harrison know what kind of person you are. One email from a Blake Properties secretary read, Ms. Johnson, I've worked here for 6 years and I've seen how Mr. Blake talked about you. He said you were the most honest person he knew. Don't let them bully you. Another from a warehouse supervisor said, My daughter was in the hospital last year and you made sure Mr. Blake knew about our situation. You paid all our medical bills. You didn't have to care about us, but you did. By evening, Rebecca had received dozens of supportive messages from employees, vendors, and community members who had benefited from Harrison's generosity over the years. They know who I really am, Rebecca said, reading through the emails. And more importantly, you know who you really are, Carlos replied. Harrison saw your character clearly. Don't let Patricia's lies make you doubt yourself. The next morning brought another escalation. Trevor appeared at the front door with 2 men in suits, but these weren't lawyers. Rebecca, we need to discuss the transition of business operations, Trevor announced, pushing past her into the foyer. What transition? The temporary management arrangement while the will is being contested. These gentlemen are from Interim Management Solutions. They specialize in handling estates during legal disputes. One of the men, Mr. Bradley, stepped forward. Ms. Johnson, during contested inheritance proceedings, it's often advisable to place business operations under neutral management to prevent any complications. Rebecca felt alarm bells going off. Complications. Well, if you were to make any significant business decisions that proved costly or controversial, it could affect the legal proceedings. It's better to maintain the status quo until everything is resolved. Carlos appeared from the kitchen, having heard the conversation. And who would pay for this interim management? Mr. Bradley smiled coldly. The estate, naturally. Our fees are quite reasonable, only about $200,000 per month. $200,000 per month? Rebecca gasped. Trevor shrugged. It's a small price to pay for peace of mind. Unless, of course, you feel confident in your ability to manage $400 million worth of businesses with no experience whatsoever. Carlos stepped forward. Gentlemen, Ms. Johnson has not agreed to any interim management. She is the legal heir and has every right to manage her inheritance as she sees fit. For now, Trevor said with a sneer. But legal challenges take time, and mistakes made during that time can be very costly. After they left, Rebecca sat down heavily on the stairs. They're not going to stop, are they? No, Carlos said honestly. They're going to keep escalating the pressure until you either give up or prove you won't be intimidated. Rebecca thought about Harrison's last words, about his trust in her, about all the people depending on the decisions she would make. Then I guess I better prove I won't be intimidated. That afternoon, Rebecca called a meeting with all the division heads. Margaret Chin, Robert Kim, Dr. Washington, and the other managers gathered in the mansion's conference room. I want you all to know, Rebecca began, that despite what you may have heard in the media, I am committed to continuing Harrison's vision. All approved projects will move forward. All charitable commitments will be honored. And anyone who wants to continue working with me is welcome to stay. Margaret Chin smiled. Ms. Johnson, we never doubted you for a moment. Dr. Washington nodded. Harrison chose well. We're behind you completely. As the meeting concluded and the managers filed out, Robert Kim approached Rebecca privately. Ms. Johnson, there's something you should know. Trevor approached me last week before the will reading. He offered me a substantial bonus if I would recommend transferring certain investment accounts to his management. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. What did you tell him? I told him that my loyalty was to Harrison and to whoever Harrison chose as his successor. But I think you should know that he's been contacting other employees as well, trying to build support for contesting the will. That evening, as Rebecca reviewed the day's events with Carlos, she made a decision that surprised them both. I want to hold a press conference. Carlos looked concerned. Rebecca, are you sure? Media attention could backfire. Patricia is controlling the narrative right now. She's making me look like a manipulative gold digger while she's the grieving sister fighting for justice. I think it's time people heard my side of the story. Carlos studied her face and saw a determination that hadn't been there before. If you're certain, I'll help you prepare. But we do this right. Professional, dignified, and with Mr. Thompson present. As Rebecca went to bed that night, she felt something she hadn't experienced since this all began, a sense of control. Patricia and Trevor could keep escalating their attacks, but Rebecca was no longer going to hide from them. The little maid was learning to fight back. The press conference was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a sunny Thursday morning in the mansion's front garden. Rebecca wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, her hair pulled back neatly, her hands steady as she approached the podium Carlos and Mr. Thompson had arranged. About 30 reporters had gathered, along with several television cameras. Rebecca could see Patricia and Trevor standing at the back of the crowd, their faces grim. Have you ever wondered what it takes for someone to transform from invisible to influential? What would give a humble maid the courage to stand up to a powerful family trying to destroy her? Make sure to subscribe and tell me in the comments what you think Rebecca should say to these reporters. Good morning, Rebecca began, her voice clear and strong. My name is Rebecca Johnson, and I worked as Harrison Blake's housekeeper for 12 years. I want to address the allegations that have been made about my relationship with Mr. Blake and the inheritance he left me. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. Harrison Blake was one of the kindest, most generous men I ever knew. For 12 years, I had the privilege of caring for his home and, in his final years, helping care for him as his health declined. A reporter shouted out, Ms. Johnson, did you manipulate Mr. Blake into changing his will? Rebecca had prepared for this question. Harrison Blake was a brilliant businessman who built a fortune through careful decisions and sound judgment. He was not a man who could be manipulated by anyone, including me. His decision to include me in his will came as a complete shock. But you were alone with him frequently, another reporter called out. You had access to his personal affairs. Yes, I did. Because that was my job. When Mr. Blake's arthritis made it difficult for him to write, I helped him with correspondence. When his eyesight made it hard to read bills, I helped organize his household expenses. When he was sick, I stayed with him to make sure he was comfortable. These weren't manipulations, they were acts of basic human kindness. Margaret Chin stepped forward from the crowd of supporters who had gathered. I'd like to say something. Rebecca nodded, and Margaret approached a second microphone. I'm Margaret Chin, I run Blake Properties. I worked with Harrison Blake for 8 years, and I can tell you that he spoke about Rebecca constantly. He said she was the most trustworthy person in his life. He said she remembered his birthday when his own family forgot, that she cared for his late wife's roses after the gardener quit, that she treated his home with more respect than people who lived there. Dr. Washington stepped forward next. I'm Dr. Lisa Washington from the Blake Foundation. Harrison told me repeatedly that Rebecca understood the importance of helping others. He said she was the only person who never asked him for anything except her paycheck. One by one, several Blake employees came forward to speak about Rebecca's character and Harrison's obvious trust in her. A reporter from Channel 7 asked, Ms. Johnson, Patricia Blake Winters claims you isolated Mr. Blake from his family. How do you respond? Rebecca felt her composure falter slightly, but Carlos gave her an encouraging nod. Harrison Blake's family was always welcome in his home. But Mr. Blake was very aware of his family's financial problems and their expectations about his estate. He documented their behavior extensively because he knew they would react exactly as they have. Trevor stepped forward from the back of the crowd. That's a lie. She turned my uncle against us. Mr. Thompson approached the microphone. Mr. Blake, your uncle left detailed records of every conversation, every request for money, every attempt to pressure him into changing his business decisions. Would you like us to make those records public? Trevor's face went white and he stepped back. A reporter asked, Ms. Johnson, what do you plan to do with the inheritance? This was the question Rebecca had been hoping for. I plan to honor Harrison Blake's wishes. All of his charitable commitments will continue. All approved business projects will move forward. And I hope to expand both the foundation's work and the company's commitment to helping working families. Can you give us specific examples? Rebecca felt her confidence growing. We're breaking ground on an affordable housing project that will provide homes for 300 working families. We're expanding our scholarship program to help more students attend college. And we're exploring investments in companies that create good jobs while protecting the environment. Margaret Chin added, these were all projects Harrison was passionate about. Rebecca is simply continuing his vision. A reporter from the business section asked, Ms. Johnson, critics say you lack the experience to manage such a large estate. How do you respond? They're right that I don't have formal business training, Rebecca replied honestly. But I have something else. I have the same values that guided Harrison Blake's decisions. I care about treating people fairly, about using wealth to help others, and about making decisions based on what's right, not just what's profitable. Carlos stepped forward. If I may add something, Harrison Blake was my business partner for 15 years. His greatest talent wasn't financial analysis or market predictions. It was choosing good people and trusting them to do the right thing. He chose Rebecca for the same reasons he chose all of us, because she has integrity. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Rebecca answered each one calmly and honestly, her confidence growing with each response. When a reporter asked about Patricia's legal challenge, she simply said, I believe the courts will uphold Harrison's clearly stated wishes. As the press conference concluded, Rebecca felt like she had found her voice for the first time in her life. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was standing up for Harrison's legacy and for all the people who would benefit from his generosity. Patricia approached her as the reporters were packing up their equipment. That was very impressive, dear, Patricia said with false sweetness. But you realize this is just the beginning. The legal challenges will be much more intense than a few softball questions from reporters. I understand, Rebecca replied calmly. But I also understand that Harrison trusted me with this responsibility, and I won't let him down. Even if it destroys your life? Even if it costs you everything? Rebecca thought about the employees who had spoken up for her, about the families who would live in the affordable housing project, about all the students who would receive scholarships because of Harrison's foundation. Mrs. Blake Winters, Harrison already gave me everything that matters. Purpose, dignity, and the chance to make a difference. You can't take those things away from me. Patricia's mask slipped completely. We'll see about that. That evening, Rebecca watched the news coverage with Carlos and Mr. Thompson. The reports were much more balanced than the previous day's stories. Several news outlets highlighted the support Rebecca had received from Blake employees and the charitable projects she planned to continue. "You did beautifully," Carlos told her. "Harrison would have been so proud." "I felt like he was there with me," Rebecca admitted. "Like he was giving me strength." Mr. Thompson smiled. "Rebecca, I've been practicing law for 40 years, and I've never seen a more dignified response to a character assassination. You turned their attacks into an opportunity to show who you really are." The phone rang and Mr. Thompson answered. After a brief conversation, he hung up with a grin. That was the judge's clerk. "Patricia's lawyers have requested an emergency hearing to challenge the will. It's been scheduled for next week." Rebecca felt her stomach flutter with nerves, but also with anticipation. "Good. Let's get this settled once and for all." Carlos raised his coffee mug in a toast. To Rebecca Johnson, who found her voice just when she needed it most. As Rebecca went to bed that night, she realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the frightened maid trying to hide from a responsibility too big for her. She was becoming the person Harrison had seen in her all along. Someone strong enough to carry on his legacy and wise enough to use his gift to help others. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time, Rebecca felt ready to fight it. The weekend before the emergency court hearing, Rebecca couldn't sleep. She wandered through the mansion at 3 in the morning, ending up in Harrison's study where boxes of his personal papers were stored. Mr. Thompson had said Harrison documented everything, but Rebecca hadn't looked through all his files yet. She pulled down a box labeled Family Correspondence 2020-2024 and settled into Harrison's leather chair. What she found inside made her understand why Harrison had been so determined to protect his legacy from his relatives. The first folder contained letters from Patricia, dating back 3 years. The tone started friendly but grew increasingly desperate as her gambling debts mounted. "Dear Harrison, I know you're concerned about my casino visits, but I have everything under control. I just need a small loan to get back on my feet. 50,000 would cover my immediate expenses. 3 months later, Harrison, I'm in serious trouble. The casino is threatening legal action if I don't pay what I owe. I need $200,000 immediately. As your sister, surely I deserve your help. 6 months after that, you're being incredibly selfish, Harrison. I'm family, not some stranger. If you won't help me voluntarily, perhaps it's time I reminded you of certain family obligations." Rebecca's hands trembled as she read the increasingly hostile letters. Patricia wasn't just asking for help, she was making threats. The next folder contained documentation of Trevor's embezzlement. Bank records showed unauthorized transfers from Blake Enterprises accounts to Trevor's personal accounts, totaling over $400,000 over 2 years. Harrison had quietly covered the losses but kept detailed records of every theft. But the most shocking folder was labeled, Private Investigations. Harrison had hired a private detective to document his family's activities. The reports were devastating. Patricia had been banned from 3 different casinos for unpaid debts. She had forged Harrison's signature on 2 different occasions to access his accounts, though the bank had caught the forgeries and reported them to Harrison. Trevor was worse. The investigation revealed he had been selling confidential Blake Enterprises information to competitors, accepting bribes for advance notice of the company's acquisition plans. He had also been using company credit cards for personal expenses, including a $40,000 vacation to Europe with his girlfriend. Most disturbing was a recorded conversation between Patricia and Trevor from 6 months ago. Harrison had apparently been suspicious enough to have his study equipped with recording equipment. Rebecca found the audio file on a small digital recorder in Harrison's desk drawer. She hesitated before pressing play, knowing that what she heard might change everything. Patricia's voice came through clearly. "He's getting weaker, Trevor. More dependent on that maid every day. Trevor, Rebecca's a problem. She has too much influence over him. Patricia, we need to do something before he makes any more changes to the will. I heard him talking to Thompson about the foundation last week." "Trevor, what kind of changes?" "Patricia, he wants to give away more money. A lot more. If he keeps expanding the charitable giving, there won't be much left for us to inherit." "Trevor, can't you talk him out of it? You're his sister." "Patricia, he doesn't listen to me anymore. Every time I bring up money he gets that look on his face. Like he knows about my casino problems." "Trevor, what if he does know?" "Patricia," there was a long pause. "Then we need to be prepared for the possibility that he might try to cut us out entirely." "Trevor, he wouldn't do that. We're family. Patricia, family doesn't mean what it used to mean to Harrison. Not since Rebecca became his little pet. Rebecca stopped the recording feeling sick. They had been planning to challenge Harrison's mental capacity months before he died. She found another recording from just 2 months ago. Trevor's voice, "The cancer is getting worse. Dr. Martinez says he might only have a few months." Patricia, "Good. I mean, it's terrible of course, but at least we won't have to wait much longer." Trevor, "What if he's already changed the will?" Patricia, "Then we can test it. We get medical experts to testify that he wasn't mentally competent. We paint Rebecca as a manipulator who took advantage of a sick old man." Trevor, "Will that work?" Patricia, "It has to work. I owe almost $500,000 to people who don't accept late payments." Rebecca sat in the dark study, Harrison's words echoing in her mind. "You are the only person in this house who has ever cared about me, not my money." She found one more folder, this one labeled, "For Rebecca." Inside was a handwritten letter she hadn't seen before. "My dear Rebecca, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you're probably facing challenges from Patricia and Trevor. I want you to know that I documented their behavior not to hurt them, but to protect you. I know they will try to paint you as a gold digger or manipulator. They will try to make you doubt yourself and your worthiness to carry on my legacy. Don't let them succeed. You earned this inheritance through 12 years of loyalty, kindness, and genuine care. You never asked me for anything except the chance to do your job well. You treated my home with respect, my possessions with care, and me with dignity even when my illness made me difficult. Patricia and Trevor see money when they look at me. You see a person. That's why you deserve to control my legacy and they don't. Use the evidence in these files if you must, but remember that the greatest evidence of your character is how you choose to use the gifts I've given you. Make me proud, Rebecca. I know you will. With love and gratitude, Harrison." Rebecca wiped tears from her eyes as she carefully returned all the documents to their folders. She now understood the full scope of what Harrison had faced. A family that saw him as nothing more than a source of money, relatives who were literally counting down the days until his death so they could inherit his fortune. The next morning, she called Mr. Thompson and Carlos to come over immediately. "I found Harrison's private files," she told them when they arrived. "You need to see this." She showed them the letters, the bank records, the investigation reports, and played the audio recordings. Both men looked increasingly grim as they reviewed the evidence. "This changes everything," Mr. Thompson said. "Patricia's gambling debts, Trevor's embezzlement, their recorded conversations planning to contest the will, it's all here." Carlos shook his head in disgust. "They were planning Harrison's funeral before he was even dead. What do we do with this information?" Rebecca asked. Mr. Thompson gathered the documents carefully. "We use it strategically. In court, when Patricia claims she's fighting for family justice and Trevor portrays himself as the responsible heir, we show the judge exactly what kind of family they really are. Will this be enough to stop their challenge?" "Rebecca, this isn't just enough to stop their challenge. This is enough to have Trevor arrested for embezzlement and Patricia charged with forgery. Harrison chose not to prosecute them, but you could." Rebecca considered this. The idea of sending Harrison's relatives to prison, even after everything they'd done, felt wrong. "I don't want them arrested," she said finally. "Harrison wouldn't have wanted that. But I do want them to stop trying to destroy me." Carlos smiled admiringly. "Even after seeing what they're really like, you're still thinking about what's best for everyone. Harrison chose the right person." The phone rang and Mr. Thompson answered. "Thompson and Associates." His expression grew serious as he listened. "I see. Yes, we'll be there." He hung up and looked at Rebecca grimly. That was the court clerk. "Patricia's lawyers have filed an emergency motion claiming you've been mismanaging the estate. They want a temporary restraining order to freeze all Blake assets until the will contest is resolved." Rebecca felt her stomach drop. "Can they do that?" "They can try. The hearing is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Carlos stood up, his jaw set with determination. "Then I guess it's time to show the judge who Patricia and Trevor Blake really are." Rebecca looked at the boxes of evidence, thinking about Harrison's trust in her and his faith that she would use his gift wisely. "Mr. Thompson, prepare everything. If they want to fight dirty, we'll show the court exactly who they're really fighting for." As the two men left to prepare for the hearing, Rebecca sat alone in Harrison's study, surrounded by the evidence of his family's betrayal. Tomorrow she would have to stand in court and defend not just her inheritance, but Harrison's final wishes and her own character. But for the first time since this battle began, Rebecca felt completely confident about the outcome. Truth had a way of winning, and she had truth on her side. The courthouse was packed with reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers as Rebecca arrived with Mr. Thompson and Carlos the next morning. She wore a dignified charcoal gray dress and carried herself with quiet confidence, despite the chaos surrounding her. Patricia and Trevor sat at the plaintiff's table with their team of expensive lawyers, whispering urgently among themselves. Patricia wore all black, as if she were attending a funeral rather than a court hearing. Judge Margaret Santos, a stern woman in her 60s, called the court to order. This is an emergency hearing on the matter of Blake versus Johnson, regarding the estate of Harrison Blake. Counselor Fletcher, you may present your motion. Mr. Fletcher, Patricia's lead attorney, stood and approached the bench. Your Honor, we're requesting an immediate freeze on all Blake assets due to the respondent's gross mismanagement and clear manipulation of the deceased. Rebecca felt her heart pounding, but Mr. Thompson had prepared her for this. Fletcher continued, Ms. Johnson has already authorized millions in questionable expenditures, including a $5 million housing project that serves no legitimate business purpose. She's making decisions far beyond her competence level, endangering the financial security of hundreds of employees and the integrity of well-established businesses. Judge Santos looked at the papers. What specific evidence do you have of mismanagement? Your Honor, the deceased was clearly not of sound mind in his final months. Ms. Johnson isolated him from his family, gradually took control of his personal affairs, and influenced him to make this unconscionable change to his will. Fletcher presented a folder to the judge. We have medical records showing Mr. Blake was on strong pain medications that could affect judgment. We have testimony from family members about his increasing dependency on Ms. Johnson. And we have evidence that she systematically excluded family members from important decisions about his care. Rebecca watched Judge Santos review the documents, trying to read her expression. Mr. Thompson, how does your client respond to these allegations? Mr. Thompson stood, carrying 3 large boxes of evidence. Your Honor, we not only dispute these allegations, we can prove they are completely false and motivated by the plaintiff's own criminal behavior. Patricia's lawyer jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. Criminal behavior is not relevant to this inheritance matter. It is when it explains the true motive for this challenge, Mr. Thompson replied calmly. Your Honor, we have extensive documentation of the real reason Mr. Blake chose to disinherit his family members. Judge Santos leaned forward with interest. I'll allow it. Present your evidence, Mr. Thompson. For the next hour, Mr. Thompson systematically dismantled Patricia and Trevor's case. He presented the bank records showing Trevor's embezzlement, the casino reports documenting Patricia's gambling addiction, and the private investigation files revealing their threats and schemes. But the most damaging evidence was the audio recordings. Your Honor, these recordings were made by Mr. Blake himself in his own study, after he became suspicious of his family's motives, Mr. Thompson explained as he set up the audio equipment. The courtroom fell silent as Patricia's voice filled the room. We need to do something before he makes any more changes to the will. Trevor's voice. What if he's already changed the will? Patricia, then we can test it. We get medical experts to testify that he wasn't mentally competent. We paint Rebecca as a manipulator who took advantage of a sick old man. The judge's expression grew stern as she listened to the entire recording. When it finished, she looked directly at Patricia and Trevor. Mr. Blake, Ms. Blake Winters, these recordings were made in Mr. Blake's private residence. Do you dispute their authenticity? Patricia's lawyer whispered urgently to her, but she looked trapped. Your Honor, these recordings were made without our knowledge or consent. In Mr. Blake's own home, Judge Santos replied dryly. Mr. Thompson, please continue. Thompson presented Harrison's medical records, showing that he was mentally competent right up until his death. He showed the judge Harrison's handwritten letters explaining his decisions, all written in clear, rational language. Your Honor, Harrison Blake didn't make this decision impulsively or under duress. He made it after years of observing his family's true character and comparing it to Ms. Johnson's consistent integrity. Then Thompson called his first witness, Dr. Martinez, Harrison's physician. Dr. Martinez, in your professional opinion, was Harrison Blake mentally competent when he made changes to his will 6 months before his death? Absolutely. Mr. Blake was suffering from cancer, but his mental faculties were completely intact. He was sharp, logical, and very aware of his circumstances. Did you observe any evidence that Ms. Johnson was manipulating or taking advantage of Mr. Blake? Dr. Martinez looked directly at Rebecca. Quite the opposite. Ms. Johnson provided excellent care that likely extended Mr. Blake's life. She was respectful, professional, and genuinely caring. Mr. Blake often told me he considered her family. Fletcher cross-examined aggressively, but Dr. Martinez held firm to his testimony. The next witness was Margaret Chin from Blake Properties. Ms. Chin, has Ms. Johnson demonstrated competence in managing Blake business affairs? Yes, absolutely. Her decision-making has been thoughtful and consistent with Mr. Blake's values. The affordable housing project she approved was something Mr. Blake had discussed with me for months before his death. In your opinion, is she capable of managing the Blake estate? With proper advisors, definitely. But more importantly, she makes decisions based on the right values. That was always Mr. Blake's greatest strength as a businessman. Fletcher tried to attack Margaret's credibility, suggesting she was biased because her job depended on Rebecca's goodwill. Ms. Chin, isn't it true that you're simply protecting your own employment by supporting Ms. Johnson? Margaret smiled calmly. Mr. Fletcher, I have 8 years of experience in commercial real estate and excellent references. If Ms. Johnson fired me tomorrow, I'd have another job within a week. I support her because she's continuing Mr. Blake's vision, not because I'm afraid of her. The hearing continued for 3 more hours. Thompson presented evidence of Rebecca's character through testimony from employees, vendors, and community members. He showed the judge documentation of all Rebecca's decisions since inheriting, proving they were all reasonable and well considered. Finally, Judge Santos called for closing arguments. Fletcher made one last attempt to portray Rebecca as an unqualified manipulator who had taken advantage of a dying man. Mr. Thompson's closing was powerful. Your Honor, this case isn't about inheritance law. It's about character. Harrison Blake spent his entire life building something meaningful, and in his final act, he entrusted it to the person who had shown him the most genuine care and respect. The plaintiffs want you to believe that a successful businessman who built a $400 million empire suddenly became gullible and incompetent in his final months. The evidence shows exactly the opposite. He became more aware than ever of who truly cared about him and who was simply waiting for him to die. Thompson gestured toward Rebecca. Ms. Johnson didn't ask for this inheritance. She didn't manipulate or scheme for it. She earned it through 12 years of loyalty, kindness, and integrity. Harrison Blake's final wish was that his legacy be protected by someone who understood the difference between wealth and worth. Judge Santos reviewed her notes for several long minutes before speaking. This court has reviewed extensive evidence regarding the mental competency of Harrison Blake at the time he executed his final will. The medical testimony is clear that Mr. Blake was of sound mind. His own recorded statements demonstrate rational thinking and clear reasoning for his decisions. Rebecca held her breath. Furthermore, the evidence presented regarding the plaintiff's behavior toward the deceased is deeply troubling. The recordings of their conversations planning to contest the will before Mr. Blake's death, combined with evidence of embezzlement and fraud, strongly suggest that their challenge is motivated by financial desperation rather than legitimate concern for Mr. Blake's wishes. Patricia gripped Trevor's arm, both of them looking pale. The court finds no evidence of undue influence or manipulation by Ms. Johnson. The evidence shows she provided excellent care to Mr. Blake and has made responsible decisions regarding the estate since his death. Judge Santos looked directly at Patricia and Trevor. However, the court is deeply concerned about the evidence of criminal activity presented here today. Mr. Blake, the embezzlement charges documented in these records are serious crimes. Ms. Blake Winters, the forged signatures and unauthorized account access constitute fraud. She turned back to the full courtroom. The motion to freeze Blake assets is denied. The will of Harrison Blake stands as written. Ms. Johnson is confirmed as the rightful heir and executor of the estate. Rebecca felt tears of relief streaming down her face as the courtroom erupted in whispers and camera flashes. But Judge Santos wasn't finished. Mr. Blake, Ms. Blake Winters, you have 30 days to make full restitution for the funds you stole or illegally obtained from your brother's accounts. If you fail to do so, this court will refer these matters to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Patricia stood up shakily. Your Honor, we don't have those funds available. Then I suggest you find them quickly. This hearing is adjourned. As people filed out of the courtroom, Carlos hugged Rebecca tightly. You did it. You won. Mr. Thompson smiled broadly. Harrison would be so proud. You've not only protected his legacy, you've proven yourself worthy of his trust. Patricia approached Rebecca as they gathered their documents. You think you've won something here today, Patricia said bitterly. But you have no idea what you're getting into. Managing that kind of money, that level of responsibility, it will consume your life. Rebecca looked at Patricia with genuine sympathy. Mrs. Blake Winters, I'm sorry your brother felt he couldn't trust you with his legacy. But he made his choice based on years of observation. I intend to honor that choice by using his gift to help people, not hurt them. We'll see how long that noble attitude lasts, Trevor muttered. I hope it lasts forever, Rebecca replied quietly. Because that's what Harrison would have wanted. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Rebecca, but she was ready for them this time. Ms. Johnson, how do you feel about the judge's decision? I feel grateful that the court recognized Harrison Blake's right to dispose of his own property as he saw fit. This was never about me deserving anything. It was about honoring the wishes of a good man who trusted me with something precious. What's your response to the criminal allegations against the Blake family? Rebecca paused, choosing her words carefully. I hope Patricia and Trevor will use this as an opportunity to get the help they need and build better lives for themselves. Harrison loved them despite their problems, and I won't celebrate their difficulties. What are your plans for the Blake fortune? The same plans Harrison had. To use wealth responsibly to help working families, to support education and healthcare, and to prove that money can be a force for good in the world. As Rebecca walked down the courthouse steps with Carlos and Mr. Thompson, she felt a profound sense of peace. The legal battle was over, but more importantly, she had proven to herself that she could stand up for what was right even when it was difficult. So what now? Carlos asked as they reached the car. Rebecca smiled, looking back at the courthouse where she had just defended Harrison's final wishes. Now we get to work building the kind of world Harrison dreamed of. 3 months after the court victory, Rebecca had settled into a routine that felt both overwhelming and exhilarating. She had moved into the mansion's master suite but kept many of Harrison's personal items exactly where he had left them. His photograph sat on the mantel, and she often found herself talking to it when she faced difficult decisions. The Blake businesses were thriving under her guidance. The affordable housing project had broken ground to tremendous community support. The foundation had doubled its scholarship offerings. And Rebecca had discovered she had a natural talent for identifying investments that aligned with her values. But she was lonely. Carlos had been traveling frequently between Chicago and the mansion, helping her navigate complex business decisions. Their relationship had remained strictly professional, though Rebecca found herself looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. On a rainy Wednesday evening, Carlos arrived unexpectedly at the mansion's front door, soaked from the storm and carrying a bottle of wine. I know it's late, he said when Rebecca answered the door in her robe and slippers. But I have news I couldn't wait until morning to share. Rebecca welcomed him into the warm foyer, noting how his dark hair was damp from the rain and his brown eyes were bright with excitement. What kind of news? The Chicago project was approved. The city council voted unanimously to support the Blake Foundation's community center proposal. Rebecca clapped her hands together. Carlos, that's wonderful. Harrison would be so happy. Carlos pulled the cork from the wine bottle. He would be proud of you, Rebecca. In 3 months, you've accomplished more charitable work than most foundations do in years. They settled in the sitting room where Rebecca had first met with Patricia's lawyers months ago. The room felt different now, lighter somehow, filled with plans and possibilities instead of threats and fear. I have something else to tell you, Carlos said, his voice growing softer. I've been offered a position running a major development firm in New York. The salary would be 3 times what I'm making now. Rebecca felt her heart sink. That sounds like an amazing opportunity. It is. But I turned it down. Why? Rebecca asked, though part of her hoped she already knew the answer. Carlos set down his wine glass and looked at her seriously. Because everything I want is right here in this room. Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. Over the past months, their working relationship had grown into something deeper, though neither had acknowledged it directly. Carlos, she began then stopped. This is complicated. You work for me now in a way. There are professional boundaries we should consider. Carlos smiled gently. Rebecca, I don't work for you. I work with you. There's a difference. Harrison made me an independent partner in the Chicago operations specifically so I could help you without any conflicts of interest. But what would people say? The maid who inherited millions and now she's dating her business advisor. People will always find something to criticize, Carlos replied. The question is whether you're going to let their opinions keep you from being happy. Rebecca thought about Harrison's final words to her about finding love and happiness. Had he somehow known this might happen? I care about you, Carlos. More than I should, probably. But I'm still learning how to be the person Harrison trusted me to become. I don't want to make mistakes. Carlos moved closer on the sofa. Rebecca, the person Harrison trusted you to become includes being someone who deserves love and companionship. He specifically told me he hoped you would find happiness in all areas of your life, not just professionally. He talked to you about this? About 6 months before he died, he asked me if I was married. When I told him I wasn't, he said I should pay attention to the remarkable woman who was caring for him. He said you had the biggest heart of anyone he'd ever known, but you'd spent so many years taking care of others that you'd forgotten how to let someone take care of you. Rebecca felt tears welling up. Even from beyond the grave, Harrison was still looking out for her happiness. I'm scared, Carlos. Everything in my life has changed so dramatically. Sometimes I wake up and can't believe any of this is real. Carlos took her hand gently. Then let's take it slow. Let's see where this leads without putting pressure on ourselves or rushing into anything. What did you have in mind? Carlos grinned. Well, for starters, I'd like to take you on a proper date. Dinner somewhere that doesn't involve discussing business deals or charitable foundations. Rebecca laughed. I'd like that. Though I should warn you, I've never been on a date that cost more than $20. Good thing money isn't an issue anymore, Carlos teased, then grew serious. Rebecca, I need you to know something. My feelings for you have nothing to do with your inheritance. I fell for the woman who remembered Harrison's birthday, who stayed up all night when he had pneumonia, who treats everyone from the gardener to the bank president with equal respect. How do I know you're not just a very sophisticated gold digger? Rebecca asked with a smile. Carlos pulled out his phone and showed her a text message from 6 months ago, well before Harrison's death. It was a note to his brother. I think I'm falling for the most amazing woman, but it's complicated because she works for my business partner and doesn't seem to know I exist. Rebecca read the message, touched by its sincerity. You really noticed me before all this happened? Rebecca, you're impossible not to notice. Your kindness, your strength, your genuine care for others. I just never thought someone like you would be interested in someone like me. Rebecca looked at this kind, successful man who had stood by her through the worst months of her life, who had defended her character when everyone else was questioning it. Carlos, I think I've been falling for you too. I just didn't think I deserved someone as good as you. That's exactly what Harrison said you'd think, Carlos replied. He said you'd have trouble believing you deserved good things in your personal life because you'd spent so long being invisible. What else did Harrison say? Carlos smiled. He said that when you finally let yourself be happy, you'd bloom like one of his prize roses. He said watching you discover your own worth would be the most beautiful thing anyone could witness. Rebecca felt overwhelmed by Harrison's continued care for her, even after his death. He really wanted us to be together? He wanted you to have everything you deserved. Love, respect, partnership, joy. He said you'd given him all those things in his final years, and he hoped someone would give them to you for the rest of your life. Rebecca leaned closer to Carlos, feeling safe and cared for in a way she hadn't experienced since her childhood. So where would you like to take me on this first date? There's a little Italian restaurant downtown that Harrison used to recommend. Nothing fancy, just good food and a quiet place to talk. Perfect, Rebecca said. Though I should probably learn how to dress for dates now that I can afford more than clearance rack specials. Carlos cupped her face gently. Rebecca, you're beautiful exactly as you are. Designer clothes won't make you any more amazing than you already are. As they sat together in the elegant sitting room, rain pattering against the windows, Rebecca felt a contentment she had never experienced. She had wealth now, yes, but more importantly, she had purpose, respect, and the beginning of something that felt like love. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Washington. Rebecca, the scholarship recipients want to host a thank you dinner for you next week. Can you attend? Rebecca showed the message to Carlos. 20 young people going to college because Harrison trusted me with his money. And because you chose to honor that trust instead of taking Patricia's $20 million and disappearing. Rebecca curled up next to Carlos on the sofa, feeling grateful for every decision that had led to this moment. Do you think Harrison can see us now? She asked. Carlos wrapped his arm around her. I think Harrison is probably very pleased with himself for being such a good matchmaker. Outside, the storm was clearing and moonlight began filtering through the windows of the mansion that was no longer just a house Rebecca cleaned, but the home where she was building a life filled with purpose and love. 1 year later, Rebecca stood in the ballroom of the Blake Mansion, watching as 300 people mingled and celebrated at the first annual Harrison Blake Memorial Gala. The event was raising money for the foundation's latest initiative, a job training program for people transitioning out of poverty. She wore a stunning emerald green dress that Carlos had helped her choose, her hair styled elegantly, but her smile was the same warm expression that had made Harrison trust her all those years ago. Margaret Chin approached with a champagne flute and a huge grin. "Rebecca, I have wonderful news. The affordable housing project is fully occupied, and we have a waiting list of 200 families." Dr. Washington joined them, equally excited. "And the scholarship program has expanded to 12 universities. We're sending 60 students to college this year, compared to 15 last year." Rebecca felt overwhelmed by the success of the foundation's work. "Harrison would be amazed by what we've accomplished." "Harrison would be amazed by what you've accomplished," Margaret corrected. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't had the courage to fight for his vision." Carlos appeared at Rebecca's side, handsome in his black tuxedo and carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Over the past year, their relationship had deepened into something beautiful and strong. He had proposed 3 months ago with Harrison's blessing, which he'd asked for in a letter written before the old man's death and given to Mr. Thompson with instructions to present it if Carlos and Rebecca fell in love. "Ladies, you're needed on stage," Carlos announced. "It's time for the presentation." Rebecca walked to the front of the ballroom, looking out at faces that had become familiar over the past year. Blake employees, foundation staff, scholarship recipients, affordable housing residents, and community leaders who had watched her transformation from invisible maid to respected philanthropist. But the most meaningful faces belonged to people who weren't there. Patricia had moved to Arizona after paying restitution for her thefts, and reportedly was attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Trevor had found a job with a small accounting firm in Seattle and was slowly rebuilding his reputation. Rebecca sent them both Christmas cards, which they never acknowledged, but she continued the tradition anyway. "Good evening, everyone," Rebecca began, her voice clear and confident. "A year ago, I was just a housekeeper who cleaned this beautiful ballroom for other people's parties. Tonight, I'm hosting a party of my own, and every person in this room is here because they believe, as Harrison Blake believed, that wealth should be used to lift people up." The crowd applauded warmly. This year, the Blake Foundation has housed 300 families, sent 60 students to college, provided job training for 400 people, and supported 37 different charitable organizations. But more importantly, we've proven that kindness, hope, and love really can change the world. Rebecca gestured toward a large screen showing photos and videos of the foundation's work. Families moving into their new affordable homes, students graduating from college, job training graduates receiving employment offers. "Harrison Blake taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the number of lives you touch with generosity and kindness. Tonight, I'm proud to announce our biggest initiative yet." The screen changed to display architectural drawings and community plans. The Blake Community Campus will be a $50 million investment in our downtown area. It will include affordable housing, job training centers, childcare facilities, healthcare services, and educational programs, all in one location designed to help families build better lives. The crowd erupted in enthusiastic applause. This campus will serve as a model for other cities, proving that private wealth can be used to address public challenges. It will be Harrison's greatest legacy and my greatest honor to build. As Rebecca concluded her remarks, she spotted 2 familiar faces in the back of the room. Patricia and Trevor had come, both looking older but somehow healthier than they had during the legal battles. After the formal presentations, Patricia approached Rebecca cautiously. "Hello, Rebecca. You look beautiful. And happy." "Thank you, Patricia. I'm glad you came." Patricia glanced around the elegant ballroom filled with people celebrating Rebecca's achievements. "I owe you an apology. Several apologies, actually." "You don't owe me anything," Rebecca replied gently. "Yes, I do. I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I couldn't see what Harrison actually wanted. He was right to choose you." Trevor joined them, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Rebecca, I've been working with a therapist this past year, dealing with some of my issues. I realize now how badly I treated both you and Uncle Harrison. I'm genuinely sorry." Rebecca felt tears welling up, remembering Harrison's love for his family despite their flaws. "I'm glad you're both doing better. Harrison loved you, you know. He was just disappointed in your choices." "We know that now," Patricia said softly. "Watching what you've accomplished this year, seeing how you've honored his memory, it's made me understand why he trusted you." Trevor nodded. "The community center proposal is brilliant. Harrison always said that helping people help themselves was the most sustainable form of charity. Would you like to be involved?" Rebecca asked, surprising herself with the offer. "The campus will need oversight, and you both have skills that could be useful." Patricia looked shocked. "You trust us with that after everything we put you through?" I trust you with the chance to honor Harrison's memory and help people who need it. Everyone deserves a second chance. Carlos joined the conversation, extending his hand to Patricia and Trevor. Rebecca's taught me a lot about forgiveness over the past year. Patricia shook his hand. She's taught all of us something, I think. Later that evening, after the last guests had departed, Rebecca and Carlos sat on the mansion's back porch, looking out at Harrison's rose garden, which Rebecca had restored to its former glory. That was quite a party, Carlos said, loosening his bow tie. I keep thinking Harrison was here somewhere, watching us celebrate everything he made possible. Carlos pulled out a small velvet box. Actually, I have one more surprise for tonight. Rebecca's heart skipped, though they had already been engaged for months. What is it? Carlos opened the box to reveal a beautiful antique ring with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. This was Harrison's mother's ring. Mr. Thompson found it in his private safe with a note saying it should go to the woman who brought the most joy to Harrison's final years. Rebecca gasped as Carlos slipped the ring onto her finger alongside her engagement ring. He thought of everything, didn't he? He wanted to make sure you knew that you weren't just inheriting his money, you were becoming part of his family. Rebecca looked at the ring, then at the roses Harrison had loved, then at the man who had stood by her through the most difficult and wonderful year of her life. Carlos, do you think people can really change their lives completely? Do you think someone can go from invisible to influential, from powerless to powerful, and still remain who they are inside? Carlos took her hand, feeling the new ring alongside the engagement diamond. I think you've already answered that question. You have more wealth and influence now than most people ever dream of, but you're still the same woman who stayed up all night when Harrison had pneumonia, who waters his roses every week, who sends Christmas cards to people who tried to destroy you. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and this will all have been a dream. If it's a dream, then we're both having it together, Carlos replied, kissing her gently. And tomorrow we get to wake up and keep building the world Harrison envisioned. As they sat together in the peaceful garden, Rebecca reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she was a maid cleaning other people's houses, invisible and forgotten by most of the world. Tonight, she was a philanthropist, a business leader, and a woman deeply in love, using her wealth and influence to help others build better lives. Harrison's final gift hadn't just been money. It had been the chance to discover her own strength, her own worth, and her own capacity to make a difference in the world. The little maid had become a force for good, proving that kindness, hope, and love really could change everything.